I think the key thing is the recreation of that childhood moment of horror. I think you have to take an adult and bring him back to his infancy, to recreate for him what frightened him. That's why in so many horror films you have a dark house, you have the stormy night, you have the lightning, the thunder. Sex is involved in it to a certain extent as well. A child's first moments of sex. We had talked earlier when you said your child was frightened by a girl just walking down a corridor. And I said I couldn't remember which film it was because I've had girls and men walking down corridors in many films. To me, the corridor is very important. The door at the end of the corridor was important. And symbolically, I think the corridor is the vagina. And the walking down the corridor is the entrance for the first time to the vagina. And I think two things must be happening during that walk. One, the audience must be living the moment with the actor on the screen and saying, go forward, find out what that mystery is, find out what that thing is at the end of the corridor that is so enticing. At the same moment, they must be saying, don't take another step forward, don't go there, that's dangerous, that's frightening. And I think this is, to a certain extent, first thoughts about sex.
Which room is it?
It's the last door at the end of this hall. You scared?
Yes.
Let's get out of here.
No. You could go on, Mr. August. You could open the door. I'd stay right here. It's only a little way, Mr. August.
We can't stand here all night.
You could go and open the door.
Your great series, they are great, of Edgar Allan Poe films that you made with Roger Corman, whose name has certainly come up before in our discussion, began, if my memory serves me again, with the House of USHER. And I'm wondering if that is correct. And secondly, what your impressions are of those early days working with Corman. If any thoughts linger, images, flashes?
Oh, yes. Roger was an extraordinary fellow. In the first place, he was extremely well organized, and he was enormously intelligent. And what he tried to do with all of us who worked in those pictures with him was to express some of the psychology of Poe's characters and to imbue our movie versions, because they really couldn't follow Poe too closely, with the real sort of extraordinary genius that is Edgar Allan Poe. I still think he's probably the greatest American writer. And we had to change the stories to fit movies, you know. I mean, a short story doesn't come out at an hour and a half.
No, it
really doesn't.
I would say in regard to the Poe films, probably the earlier ones. The ideas were fresher. I was more interested in the genre at that time. I would say, therefore, probably The Fall of the House of Usher, the first, or The Pit and the Pendulum, the second, or possibly The Mask of the Red Death, which was the first one I did in England. The ones I did in the United States all had a 3-week schedule. And when I went to England, I had a 5-week schedule, and I thought, wow, I'm in the big time. It wasn't until I was there that I realized the English crews worked much slower, and that 5 weeks in England was equal to maybe 4 weeks in the United States. So it was a slight movement up.
You know that I could hear every sound she made. That I heard her breathing in her casket. Heard her first gasp as she awoke. Her first scream of terror.
Is she still alive?
No.
Is she?
No.
Is she?
Yes, even now I hear her. Yes. Alive. Deranged. Infuriate. Can you not hear her voice?
Organization is the right word. It was pre-production planning. I'm a great believer in having as much of the film planned.
But you went all out in one, didn't you? Was it the terror? the legend goes, I think you had a couple of days or a day left over with the cast, and you made it in a day or two.
Well, that's approximately correct. I shot all of the interiors with Boris Karloff in 2 days. And, as a matter of fact, what happened was I was finishing up The Raven. And I was supposed to play tennis on a Sunday, and it was raining. So I was sitting around my house, and I was thinking, gee, I've really got good sets here in The Raven. I might be able to put something together and reuse those sets. So I called a writer who was a friend of mine, and on that Sunday afternoon we met and worked out a storyline. And I said, I have to shoot within a week because I'll finish The Raven in 1 week. And what we decided to do, since we couldn't really put together a full script in a week, we worked out the storyline that afternoon, and then we wrote the pages for the 2 days with Boris Karloff. And I talked to Vincent Price first, and Vincent was going on a lecture tour, so he couldn't do it, so I worked out a deal with Boris to work the 2 days. And then I hired Jack Nicholson, who was a friend of mine, and a couple other actors who were friends of mine, and I said, we will shoot 2 days on this picture on these sets. Then we will break. We'll write the rest of the picture from this rough storyline we've got, and then we'll shoot the added scenes. Now, I shot on the sets with a union crew, but I didn't have the money to finish the picture with a union crew, so I only shot the interiors. The exteriors, I had probably half the young directors in town shooting. Francis Coppola shot part of it, Monty Hellman shot part of it, Dennis Jacobs shot a portion, Jack Hill, and finally at the end, Jack Nicholson, the thing had gone for months because somebody would shoot for a couple of days and then go on to another assignment, and somebody else would shoot a couple of days later. Finally, Jack Nicholson said, look, I can direct as well as any of these guys. I'll finish the picture up. So I said, fine. So Jack went out the last day, directed himself, and we finished the film.
Is that right? That's marvelous. Karloff, is there something about him that stands out in your memory mind, Vincent?
Well, you know, I think working with actors and knowing them, it's a great privilege, really, to know certain people in the profession. Boris was, first of all, a real professional, a man who loved to work, knew his job, knew exactly what he was doing.
Well, I remember that Boris Karloff was a very nice guy to work with, but very well organized and prepared. He was the kind of actor who would come in knowing what he was going to do, and he could modify a little bit from it, but you had to pretty much stay with his preparation. He was a very good actor. I remember working with Peter Lorre. It used to drive Boris crazy, because Peter was the exact opposite. Peter would come in, I would meet with Peter, meet obviously with all the actors beforehand and go over the general ideas and themes of what we were working with. And Boris would then build upon that and come in with almost a finished performance. Peter would just come in with what we had discussed and work on his performance and improvise on the set. And it was very difficult for Boris to relate to Peter, because Peter would come up with great ideas, really sensational ideas on the set, which I thought were wonderful, and I'd work with Peter, and we'd build and change and work things out. And Boris was sitting there with the lines he had come in with that morning, and it was very difficult for him, but he worked well with Peter.
Peter I knew very well. Peter was more difficult to know. I don't know why, but he just wasn't quite as easy to know. Peter was a joker, and loved to make sort of remarks and jokes and things. He was wonderful.
Putting one on, too?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And Basil was another case of a really extraordinary man, a very intelligent, wonderful man. Rather bitter at the end of his life, I think, about having been stuck in the Sherlock Holmes things and not being able... A little bit, yeah. And I think he would have been pleased now to see the revival of them. But, you know, he was a brilliant actor, Basil. And when movies changed and we all sort of were edged out by the Brandos and the Jimmy Deans and people didn't speak English anymore, suddenly we all had to go into other areas of the business, into the costume pictures, into the places where we would be understood.